Hey everyone, my name is Jeff Volaski. I'm the CEO and founder of StatRoute. A little bit about myself before I jump in. I actually started this company in Denver, and last February I came to St. Louis for the Capital Innovators Accelerator program, and have not left. So what started as a 3-month adventure for my wife and kids and I ended up being our kind of new home at this point. And now we work out of T-Rex here, and actually live like a mile down the road. So I think that says a lot about the St. Louis startup community right there. So StatRoute, we are a sports tech company that is simplifying complexities for fantasy sports consumers. So quick show of hands, how many of you are a fantasy football player this year? Not too many. 3 is good though. Let's play pretend for a second. I want you all to imagine that you are playing in a fantasy football league. And it's week 13 of the NFL season, and you need to get a win to get into the playoffs. It's your work league, so you were dragged in and your money is on the line and your pride's on the line. But to make matters worse, you're playing that really annoying guy at work. You know the guy who never stops talking about his fantasy team? It's kind of me. The last thing you need is to show up on Monday and have him stroll to your desk and talk about how he beat you. But this week you have an important decision to make. You could start Aaron Rodgers at quarterback or Jameis Winston. Now for the fantasy players in the room, it's an easy decision 9 times out of 10, it's Aaron Rodgers. But this week, Aaron's playing in Chicago, and the wind's blowing in off the lake at 20 miles an hour, and it's raining. And Jameis, he's at home in sunny Tampa, and he's playing the Browns. So as you can see, with just a little bit of context, this entire story changes. Now that guy at work, he's going to go to 4 or more sites this week, and he's going to spend hours looking at data points that we've seen for the last 10 years. He's going to listen to the experts in the industry. And you're going to go to one site. You're going to go to StatRoute, and you're going to look at what we call contextual data. Data points that matter, like how a player performs in the rain when it's windy, or how a player performs against poor defenses in the second half of the season in the red zone. And on Monday, when you go into work, he's going to be a little bit too busy to say hello. Now, the example I gave about Jameis and Aaron, this type of decision happens to millions of fantasy football players every single week. But it's not just fantasy football players. Did you guys know that there are 75 million people who play fantasy sports in the world today? Sports like baseball, and basketball, and golf, and hockey, and NASCAR, and rugby, and cricket. There's even sports like fantasy surfing, and fantasy fishing, and my personal favorite, fantasy bachelor. Now, there are millions and millions and millions of decisions made every single day by customers using data that is out of context in an industry that is highly fragmented and crowded. These decisions are important. How important are they? $7 billion. That's how much money was spent last year in the fantasy sports industry alone in the US. And this number is actually small when you consider a much larger market. Which is sports bettors. Do you know that last year there were over $150 billion spent in the US alone by sports bettors making decisions with data that is out of context? Globally, that number is much bigger, $1 trillion. Every dollar spent by a customer making a decision. StatRoute is here to simplify these complexities. This year we released an NFL product with a database that is way more robust than anything that's offered out there today. But on our front end, we make it easy and accessible for customers so that you can filter over 275 different filters in any order in real time, updating a data table, compared to the industry standard, which allows you to filter 1 filter at a time and offers 10 to 12. We have data points that do not exist anywhere else in the NFL market that we're giving customers today. And we understand that all users are different and all customers are different. So we're working to customize the experience for all different user types. Because if I'm from Florida, I might think cold is 40 degrees, and if I'm from Minnesota, that's hot for me. And the data points that matter to me might not matter to you when you make your decisions. So we're creating solutions where customers can customize and tailor-make their data and make it easy and fun. And lastly, our vision is to create a platform where customers can share and connect with each other using data analytics on a peer-to-peer network, cutting out the middleman and the silo effect, which has been happening in the industry for so long. I want to talk about 2018 a little bit. In 2018 was a big year for us. So we finally got to market last 2-3 months ago in September, which for us is obviously a big accomplishment. We launched our MVP, which is in the NFL industry for fantasy sports consumers and also sports bettors. Had some bumps, and but overall very, very excited about this. Another win for us this year was that the St. Louis community has really stepped up for the company and really bought in, and we've had a lot of doors open up for us, specifically with some money we've raised, as well as some mentors and advisors. And lastly, there's a lot of interest in the direction that StatRoute is going with professional athletes and industry leaders. Just last week, we signed a deal with Bobby Portis to be an advisor to the company to help us with data analytics, introductions to the Chicago network, and then of course marketing. We also have a deal in the works with NFL Hall of Famer John Randall, who we speak to, and he's helped us out a lot with understanding the data metrics that they used back when he was playing, and he's still very involved with the team and understanding what they're doing now. He's continuing to be an advisor to the company. We have 2 to 3 other fantastic business people, successful founders who are on our team, and we have a lot of great opportunities with big companies to move ahead with partnerships and so on and so forth. And when I get into one of the next slides, it's going to be our challenges, and I'm going to kind of come back to that. I want to give you a quick 50,000-foot view of what we're looking at doing at StatRoute in the next 5 years. We launched in September, mobile app, and what we like to call Z data. It's not a term we coined, but Z data is data that's on the field. So if you look at how a player does against a tight man press coverage versus soft zone coverage, or how he does when his linebacker misses it, or his offensive lineman missed a block, or how does Russell Wilson do when he's on the right side of the field in the red zone versus the left side of the field. Data that is on the field that you can't find anywhere else, that only a handful of companies are doing. We're starting the process to get Z data for all 5 sports. Then we get a little crazy. We want to bring this, so actually before we go global, the next big focus for us is going to be to make user-driven data so that you can build your own projections, your own optimizers, and eventually have a peer-to-peer network where you can share that with one another, disrupting the expert profiles in the industry. And lastly, what we like to call a flattening effect, which is a total distribution of power, which if anyone's interested in learning more about this, it's an idea that we've come up with that kind of was the genesis of the company, where we give the customers the ability through our social platform to be their own house, essentially, and to make their own daily fantasy leagues or their own year-long leagues, and run it through their own peer-to-peer network with their own user data analytics, driven by StatRoute, which is obviously end-all goal for the company, aside from the exit in 5 years if we're able to accomplish all this. In the next 12 months, we're introducing all 5 sports and a mobile application. That is our goal and our intent. One second. And lastly, I was given the pitch instructions. It was, what do you need help with, and how can people get involved? We're definitely a startup, and we're feeling a lot of startup pains. Specifically, we're using an offshore development team, and it's becoming a bit of a problem, and it's really handcuffed us in many ways. The first being, my CTO says it best. They cost 1/3 the money, but they take 3 times as long to do things, and we are really struggling, and we're kind of stuck in that. I can't afford to take the risk to bring on something in-house with the capital we have, but I also know that we can't make this thing work long term. And so if anyone's had experience with transitioning of tech, would love to speak with you. Second is, this year we went live and we had a lot of technical challenges. We had a lot of UI, UX challenges, which we still have, and a lot of issues communicating with our voices to customers. And we're not a fantasy football company, but that's what people associate us as. And we have a hard time describing our why and our value prop to people quickly. And so if there's any people who have taken an interest in this space or have had experience in marketing to consumers in a crowded industry, we would love to have you jump in and help us out any way you can. And then lastly, like every startup, capital. We definitely did a great job this year in getting out to market. We were late, however. We missed a lot with our technical issues. And now obviously we're going to be raising some more money this winter. I, as the founder, do not want to, so I want to focus on bootstrapping this thing as long as I can and taking on money to get us to where we can find a really solid product market fit before we take on a larger investment to capture this big vision, that 50,000 foot view. And so we are looking for a few angels this winter to help us get through this hurdle. We are releasing our NBA product in the next 3 weeks, which has a really unique value prop that we're able to communicate, and with Bobby Portis involved, we feel really confident about getting to that stage. So that's StatRoute in a nutshell. I want to thank you guys all for coming out here today and look forward to your questions.
All right. Holy cow, this one is loud. So hold it back. Wait for the microphone before asking your question, please. Aaron, you're going to be first.
Are you going to be taking this to teams so management can make decisions on players and who they recruit and why?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that. I would love to say yes, absolutely. Operationally, there's challenges. We've also identified, it's interesting, like in baseball, they don't really need that much help in data analytics, but some of the sports have some deficiencies, and so we've had, sore subject, we have contacts with the Rams from here that have put us in touch with some of their data analytics people, and there is some interest in us doing side projects. That's something we will take on once the season ends. Working collaboratively with them on side projects. We also found an interesting area in collegiate athletics. It's a challenging space for data scientists and people to get into, and the colleges don't invest a lot of money, so even these D1 schools for like baseball and a lot of football schools too, don't have the metrics that we will have. So there is a spin-off opportunity with StatRoute to go B2B as like a SaaS provider of Z data for colleges and minor league baseball, stuff like that. But on a big league level, especially baseball, we don't see that as an opportunity right now.
How is this, how do you monetize this?
Yeah. Right now, when we look at that 3-tiered approach that we're taking, which is to eventually get to that peer-to-peer freemium type model, in order to get there, we obviously have to have operating capital to get through these stages. And so we're starting off as a revenue subscription model. And right now we're at $14.99 a month or $99 a year, but it's hard to justify a yearly because we don't have sport as of this moment. So we're flooding a lot of promo codes out there and just trying to.
So for your $14.99 a month, how are you marketing that? How do people know about you and find out about the subscription?
Yeah, that one stinks. So this is when I say like our challenges this year is communicating, our features and our value prop and what makes us different. And I can tell you we have a lot of work to do to make that better. We focused a lot on digital media, Facebook and Reddit and Twitter, both with paid ads and then organic and engaging with customers. We found that the levers to get people to click on our ads are actually pretty easy in this industry. We've got our cost per click on Facebook to 20 cents, which I think is really good. But the conversion numbers after that are really bad, and that's on us. And as far as like getting that conversion process built a little bit better.
So I have 2 questions. So first, how are your clients doing in their leagues? Because I work with a lot of companies that deal with stats, and the problem is it's not the stats, it's actually the user experience, right? Getting that information to the user so that they can use it and actually win. So do you have a lot of feedback?
Yeah, I love that question, by the way, because I'm all about, I think fantasy sports and sports betting, I don't think it's about the money. I think it's just about the feeling, the emotion. I think the same thing with stats and data. It's about finding that Easter egg. And we kind of built this, and it's large, and it's hard for people to jump in and get it. But once we get them over that hurdle, we have our active users are very active on the site, and they like discovering things. But it's been a challenge to get them over that obstacle. I'm not sure if I answered your question entirely. Follow up.
Just, have people you gotten good feedback on it, or people using it?
Yeah, overall feedback is when we talk to them the first time, they say either A, like, how are you doing? And then we walk them through it, we show them, and it makes sense. Or they say, I didn't get it, which pains me. But the people who get over that obstacle, they love it. When we talk to people, like I talk to a customer almost every day. So you guys might see me pacing around on the phone. It's, oh, that's awesome. Can you check that out? Or it's, hey, I've been using this for this one thing over and over and over again. So there's some sticky elements to it, but we have to do a better job of, instead of starting at level 3 with them, start at level 1 and work them up.
Have you talked to Stadia Ventures? I'm sure people have pointed you out.
We spoke with them quite a bit, actually. I applied for their fall one, or spring cohort, and we were pre-revenue, and right now we're still considering them for spring, or hopefully to consider us, and so it's kind of a wait and see, but I've met with Brandon and Austin, who was with them quite a bit.
So I was a founding member and I guess GM of our Bachelorette Fantasy League at my company, and it's a ton of work. We did it pretty simply. We did a pivot table, we had a draft, you had your 3 starters you pick up from the bench. But I think having a pre-packaged league in a box would exponentially blow it out of the water, just because nobody wants to be the GM and nobody wants to be the owner. Yep. So my personal experience, partnerships is the best way to bring in sales. So look at companies that are very focused in the female demographic or the just non-sports fantasy. So like, there's a really cool website called Bitches You Brunch that just rate brunches in like Chicago, LA, New York. They're really good with partnerships. It's 2 women who started working at, I believe, the Daily Skim, and they decided to do their own company. So partnerships where they have a pre-packaged, like, hey, we're working with StatRoute to help you do, the best English bakery fantasy off the, like, basically any reality TV show that's competitive-wise. Yeah. So my friend, Vin Trin, he wanted to help me do the RuPaul Drag Race. So I helped him build the fantasy league so his friends could draft and then drink and watch RuPaul with a bit of competition. As you said, it's about bragging and fun. Yeah. So I think that would really lower your customer acquisition costs. It would also increase the LTV, because then each person knows StatRoute provides a one-off package. Yeah. And then let these partnerships sell for you. And like, just going through the channel would really help you blow out your gross total value, and you wouldn't have to hire a head of sales. Just get a head of partnerships and reach out to everybody.
That was you hit on 2 points that are really important, I think. The first one is our plan for customer acquisition this year was partnerships, and we set up, we called them our channel partners. We had over 55 different fantasy sports companies, and they were smaller companies like podcasts and media and smaller sites, and some were big fish, but not huge. And we grossly overestimated their ability to convert users or to get people on our site. And one of the things we learned is, like, people follow them, but it's a vanity metric. And so, like, they'll see it, but they're not really clicking through. And so the pivot that we're looking at, and we're starting this almost right, we are starting it now, is looking at things that work in medium to big size fish and focusing on like 5 or 6 and not trying to operationalize 55. So I think one of the things you said resonated with me is like, lean into something you can find value in, and then it grows, and your LTV will grow with it.
Yeah,
so
I'd say try to be like the one company that does one thing.
Yeah.
So just do RuPaul fantasy.
Yeah.
Nobody else does now.
Yeah. And then your point about commissioning and running leagues real quick is that's where, when we get to like 2021 on my North Star with this thing, is I want it to be where, let's say you like running leagues because you're crazy, and I'm on a platform with you, I could say, hey, Joe,
What's my name?
is it?
Yeah.
Good guess, I hope it is. Hey, Joe, will you run my league for 15 credits? And you say, yeah, I'll do it. And then you're running my league, so we have a peer-to-peer transaction on StatRoute taking a cut, and everyone's happy. And so then when I say decentralizing, that's where I want to take this company eventually. Find value props like that.
And just as a follow-on, like in Dungeons and Dragons, with these old dungeon masters, like all they do is figure this out.
Right.
So you can find some, hey, we want to have a really competitive point per reception league, and then it's some dude in Bangalore,
Yeah.
just is a mutual arbiter.
Well, and you think about like LinkedIn, we connect with people every day that we don't know, but they're like-minded with us and we share commonalities. And the same thing with fantasy sports. We play in leagues with people that we suddenly become friends with that we've never met. And it's because we have a commonality. And so why isn't there a way to connect consumers to engage with one another? That's ultimately what we're trying to grab here.
I know you mentioned social media as far as your marketing, but when you start talking about sports fans, they still are into traditional marketing because they're watching television. So have you considered that?
From a cost value stance, I don't love it right now, just because it's noisy. You have ESPN has a thing called Next Gen Stats, which I won't say anything bad about. But that's on your Sunday night ESPN games or Monday night games, and then you have Pro Football Focus, which is probably a competitor of ours. They're our big brother, so next year we will hopefully be competing with them. And Chris Collinsworth, the broadcaster on Thursday night, is an investor with the company. He's one of the board guys. So there's a lot of noise to get in that space, and I think like kind of coming under that and finding like niche markets to work. And then at that point, like my vision and dream for this is to get that product market fit that is growing and sustainable and raise a significant amount of money to build this platform and work to disrupt it. But obviously that's down the road, of course, but that's kind of what we're looking at. But I don't think, to answer your question, for us right now to get into television is the way to go. I think it's going to be brand ambassadors, social, creating FOMO. It's cheesy and cliche, but I think that's what we have to start working at.
Hey, great presentation. I don't know if someone's asked this, but college and also high school are big things that people look at for basketball as well as how do you plan to target those markets and start to look at stats and use that data to then maybe sell it to recruiters and scouts? That may be a revenue stream.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. That is a challenge in and of itself, especially when you look at high school and down data. There are people out there that are trying to crack that right now. A guy that I talk to regularly, he used to play for the Detroit Lions, his name's Ryan McNeil, who's doing a company where they're looking at data from college camps for like decades back for kids all the way up to high school. And his vision, I'm going to screw this up, so if he's ever watching this, I'm sorry, but his vision is eventually get data points and metrics all the way up to a pro level. So I can say like, hey, Tom Brady when he was 14 was 6'1" and he weighed 175. We could throw this ball and his release time was this fast. And so now you, as a kid in Louisiana, can look at what Tom Brady was doing at this point and work towards, that slide instead of having an abrupt ending. And there's a lot more that he's doing. But to answer your question is what we are looking at doing, why me and Ryan talk is when we get to an appropriate stage, if we align partnering and using our data and kind of sharing our data to solve problems, to create better stories, things like that. And so our road there would be partnerships and revenue sharing type deals.
All right, I'll give Wes one question, then I'm going to take the last one.
Good. Well, also, just wanted to say your presentation it looks very professional. Thank you. It's great. You talk a little bit about the competition, and ultimately you're relying on, I would imagine, third-party stats providers who are getting this kind of ground truth data. So, what are you doing to build a defensible business around that so that someone else can't come along and use the same providers and generate the same data?
So you guys won't believe me when I tell you this, but most of the sites out there that offer data are not accurate. The big ones are accurate, like big stats, like passing yards and stuff like that. But if you go like ESPN for their team passing yards don't account for sack yards, but Pro Football Reference does. And so NFL team stats are different. It's kind of an interesting thing we learned this year was that, yes, third-party providers are everywhere, but all the way upstream, where they're getting this data from upstream is not always accurate, and they don't go back and cross-check it. So we find data issues constantly with plays where there was a penalty or plays where there was a lateral. And we look back at the data and it's wrong. And some of the data providers out there that we've found, and data companies you guys know, will have data that is not aligned with the NFL rulebook. And so it's fascinating because you just kind of assume it. And I spent 20 years as a consumer in this industry, and I never even thought about it. One of the things we're looking at doing to fix it is when we talk about Z data. We're building this like quick, simple front-end application where you push buttons and input data, and we're going to look at offshore teams with quality control checks, but we don't want to start fast. We want to build it and scale it up. I would like to be the source of record for data. Someone asked me that like 3-4 months ago on my team, was like, who's our source of record? Because all the data we're having is problematic here and there. And I was like, we are. That's where I want us to be.
So you already answered the question, what can the community do for you? I think you did a good job of that. Could you just expound on your background? We're talking about data and stats and everything, or are you a statistician?
Yeah, so I'm like your, if I pull this off, your prototypical entrepreneurial success story. I started out as just like a sports management, like, normal college guy, and I ended up just getting frustrated every year with fantasy. It was particularly fantasy. And so 2013, I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to change the world. And I started, and I realized I knew nothing. At this point, I didn't know how to use Excel. Like, I could do basic functions. And so I self-taught myself for a year how to do, what a database was, and learn all this stuff along the way. And a year and a half later, I got a job as a software consultant in Denver, and I took the job so I could learn more and be around technical people. And then I went and I worked as a software consultant for a database company for 2 years or so. And while I did that, I went and got my MBA because I realized that I didn't know that much. And so I've really been the last 8 years of my life focusing on solving this problem, which is a hard one to grasp for me, but I get it. So my background really is operations, database management, and my academic MBA with it. But in 20 plus years, I was one of the first consumers of fantasy sports. And I was the guy who would like sit down in my room with baseball cards and read the backswing for hours. Like, that was me growing up. So.
All right. Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.